The rain had been relentless that night, hammering against the pavements and splashing up onto the headlights of passing cars. Maria Turner pulled her coat tighter around herself, gripping the steering wheel with a mix of fatigue and determination. Another late shift at the diner had left her bones aching, her mind cluttered with unpaid bills and half-remembered dreams. Yet here she was, waiting at the curb because she couldn't ignore someone in trouble, not when she had once relied on the kindness of strangers herself. The black sedan lurched down the slick street, headlights bouncing against the wet asphalt. Behind the wheel was a man whose presence seemed out of place in the drizzle-soaked city, a sharp suit damp from the rain, tie loosened, and a faint scent of whiskey trailing the air around him. His confidence seemed stripped away by the storm and alcohol, revealing a vulnerability few ever saw. He stumbled toward her car, fumbling with the keys in a hand that had always held power but now shook slightly. Need a lift," he slurred. Maria hesitated for just a heartbeat. Usually, she ignored strangers. Usually, she had no energy to take on other people's messes. But something in his eyes, the faint panic behind the polished facade, made her sigh. "Hop in," she said. The car smelled faintly of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke, a strange contrast to the warmth of her own little world. He sank into the seat with an awkward grace, mumbling a thank you that was almost lost to the sound of the wipers cutting through the downpour. "Where to?" she asked, keeping her tone casual, though her heart beat faster than it had all day. Home," he muttered. "Chelsea. Penthouse." Maria nodded, gripping the wheel. "Chelsea it is." The ride was silent, save for the rain drumming on the roof and the occasional hiccup from him. She glanced at him through the rearview mirror, noticing how the sharp lines of his jaw softened when he wasn't performing for the world, how his hands, always steady in the boardroom, now fumbled with the hem of his suit jacket. "I'm Maria," she said finally. "You?" "Ethan Blackwood," he replied, voice husky. "CEO of Blackwood Enterprises." She raised an eyebrow, smirking. The drunk CEO, now asking a stranger for a ride home. He chuckled, a short, brittle sound. "You have no idea." By the time they reached the sleek tower overlooking the city, the storm had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the streets glistening and reflective. Maria guided the car to the valet, helping him out despite his half-hearted attempts to protest. He was heavy with exhaustion and liquor, but she could feel the weight of responsibility behind it, the weight that came with running empires, making decisions that affected thousands, maybe millions. "Here we are," she said softly. He looked at her, the usual arrogance stripped away. Why did you help me?" Maria shrugged, trying to hide the flutter in her chest. "Because no one deserves to be alone in the rain." For a moment, he simply stared, as if unaccustomed to kindness that had no ulterior motive. Then he smiled, a small, genuine curl of lips that seemed foreign on a face accustomed to command. "I think I like you," he said quietly, the words more confessional than flirtation. Maria blinked, startled. You like me?" "Yes," he said, eyes locking onto hers with a sincerity that made her stomach tighten. "Not just tonight. I mean, I don't know how, but I do." She laughed softly, a nervous, incredulous sound. "You're drunk. You're supposed to say nonsense when you're drunk." He shook his head, sober in that moment more than anyone might admit. "This isn't nonsense. I haven't felt this way in a long time. I'm used to control, Maria. Boardrooms, contracts, schedules, but you just exist without needing anything from me, and somehow, that scares me." Her heart thudded, a strange mix of fear and curiosity. She had spent years protecting herself, believing that the world of men like him was out of reach, a glittering, untouchable reality meant for someone else. And yet here he was, vulnerable, authentic, and completely unexpected. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above the hum of the city outside. "You don't have to say anything," he replied, stepping closer, careful despite his unsteady balance. "Just let me try. Let me prove that not everything in my world is impossible or toxic or," he faltered, "or just a mess of lies and loneliness." Maria studied him, seeing past the polished exterior, past the drunk stumble, past the wealth and fame that had defined him. She saw a man capable of tenderness, of recognition, of change. She saw a possibility she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years, that her life, exhausted and solitary as it was, could intersect with his in ways that didn't require compromise of who she was. As the night deepened, The city lights reflected off the rain-slick streets, turning the skyscrapers into shimmering beacons. Ethan offered his arm, and she accepted, walking beside him up to the penthouse doors. He paused at the threshold, looking down at her with a quiet intensity. "Maria, I don't know where this goes, but I do know I want you in my life." She hesitated, aware of the risks, aware of the improbability. "And I don't know if I'm ready to step into a world like yours." He smiled softly, a promise rather than persuasion. "You won't have to step into my world. I'll step into yours." That night, as she left him safely inside and returned to her small apartment, Maria felt a flutter of hope she hadn't dared feel in years. The storm outside had passed, but inside her, something else had shifted, a seed of possibility, fragile yet undeniable. Ethan stayed awake that night in his sleek penthouse, staring out at the city he had always ruled, but never truly known. For the first time, he understood the gravity of being human, of vulnerability, and of connection. And he knew, with an unshakable certainty, that Maria Turner had changed his life forever. Little did either of them know, that night was only the beginning. The collision of their worlds would uncover secrets, force choices, and ignite a journey neither of them could have predicted, one that would test their courage, their hearts, and the fragile line between love and destiny. The following days blurred into a surreal rhythm. Maria found herself thinking of Ethan at odd hours, wondering if his words had been a drunken fantasy or the start of something real. Meanwhile, Ethan could not shake the image of her determined eyes, the warmth in her smile, the subtle strength that seemed to radiate from her even in exhaustion. Then, one evening, a small envelope arrived at her apartment. No return address, only her name, written in precise handwriting. Inside, a simple card read, "Dinner. Tonight. No business. Just us." Her heart skipped. Hesitation and anticipation warred within her, but something deep inside whispered that this was no ordinary man, no ordinary invitation. She decided to take the chance, stepping into a night that would slowly unravel every certainty she had held about life, love, and herself. And that night, under the city lights and the faint drizzle of a lingering storm, Maria would meet Ethan again. Not as a stranger in need, not as a drunk billionaire, but as a man who had glimpsed something real, something human, something capable of transforming the lonely corners of her life into a story neither of them would ever forget. The moment their eyes met across the softly lit restaurant, the world seemed to pause. Conversation, laughter, even the soft jazz in the background faded into insignificance. They were two souls, solitary until now, discovering an improbable connection in a universe that had offered no guarantees. Ethan reached across the table, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, careful yet deliberate. "I promise," he said, voice low and unwavering, "I don't want to ruin your life. I want to build something, together." Maria felt a warmth that was foreign yet welcome, a fragile hope taking root amidst years of struggle. "And if it's complicated?" she asked. He smiled, a mixture of vulnerability and confidence. "Then we'll face it together. Every challenge, every obstacle. But only if you let me." She nodded, sensing the shift, sensing the potential of a story unfolding, one that would change everything she thought she knew about love, fate, and what it meant to trust someone completely. And as the night deepened outside, the rain fading into mist, both Maria and Ethan realized that the life they had led separately, the lonely nights, the relentless struggles, the missed chances, had been preparing them for this improbable, intoxicating beginning. The journey was just starting, and neither of them could have anticipated how extraordinary it would become. The days that followed were a blur of contrasts. Maria's world of long shifts, grocery runs, and school drop-offs collided with Ethan's realm of boardrooms, private jets, and endless meetings. Yet somehow, the collision didn't feel jarring. It felt inevitable. Each time she stepped into his penthouse, the gleaming walls and polished surfaces no longer intimidated her. They were a backdrop to something far more human, something fragile, real, and alive. Ethan, for his part, discovered the extraordinary in the ordinary through her eyes. He watched her juggle deadlines at work, bills, and the tiny chaos of life with her son, Jake, whose laughter and mischief became a rhythm in Ethan's previously structured, sterile world. He found himself waiting for the small victories, watching Maria finally fix a leaky faucet, or seeing Jake draw a crooked, endearing picture of their family, and realizing that these moments mattered far more than any boardroom triumph. One Saturday morning, as sunlight streamed through the modest kitchen of Maria's apartment, Ethan found himself chopping vegetables alongside Maria while Jake played with his toy cars at the table. The contrast was stark, CEO of a multinational empire reduced to the humble act of preparing breakfast. And yet, he smiled more genuinely than he had in years. "You know," Ethan said, carefully slicing tomatoes, "I never thought I'd find peace in cooking." Maria glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Peace? Really?" "Yes," he said, smiling at the sight of Jake holding up a drawing. "And chaos. Both seem equally important now." Maria laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the tiny apartment. "You're learning fast. Or maybe I'm just lowering my standards for you." Ethan shook his head. "No. You're teaching me something I didn't even know I needed." As the weeks turned into months, their connection deepened, not through grand gestures or public declarations, but through the quiet, everyday acts of caring, listening, and understanding. Ethan began attending parent-teacher meetings, genuinely interested in Jake's progress. He learned to navigate a world without power suits and corporate jargon, and he found that the challenge was exhilarating in a way no boardroom ever was. One evening, after putting Jake to bed, Maria and Ethan sat on her small balcony, the city lights twinkling below like a constellation they could almost touch. "You've changed so much," Maria said softly, leaning against him. "And you've shown me life I never thought I'd experience," Ethan replied, brushing her hair from her face. "You've taught me patience, resilience, and that love isn't something you control. It's something you nurture." Maria felt a lump in her throat, realizing how completely she had allowed herself to trust him. In a world that had always demanded self-reliance, Ethan's presence was both thrilling and terrifying. "I never imagined someone like you could be real," she admitted. "I'm as real as the rain that night," he said, recalling the moment she had first driven him home. "The night I was lost, alone, and vulnerable. You saw me when no one else did." She smiled faintly, her heart pounding with a mixture of warmth and anticipation. "And now what?" "Now," he said, taking her hands in his, "we build something together. Not my world, not yours, ours." The following months brought new challenges, though not the insurmountable kind. Balancing her work and motherhood with Ethan's high-profile life tested their patience, their communication, and their trust. But every obstacle revealed something extraordinary. Their ability to adapt, to compromise without surrendering themselves, to protect what was fragile while daring to dream. One afternoon, as they walked through a city park, Jake running ahead with a friend, Ethan stopped Maria, pulling her close. "I've been thinking," he said, eyes searching hers, "about what this all means. About us. About the life we could have." Maria's heart raced. "And—" He knelt suddenly, startling her, and produced a small velvet box. "Maria Turner. I never believed in fairy tales. But then I met you, and you changed everything. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes, a mixture of disbelief, joy, and overwhelming love. She had spent years surviving, working, protecting herself, shielding her heart. And now, here he was, offering not only love but partnership, respect, and a future she had never dared to imagine. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible over the rustling leaves and distant city sounds. "Yes, Ethan." The moment was quiet, intimate, and perfect in its simplicity. They embraced, not as a billionaire and a single mom, but as two people who had found each other against all odds, each having weathered storms and heartbreaks, and now ready to step forward together. Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were challenges, press releases, social scrutiny, adjustments to blended routines, but these were no longer obstacles, they were shared responsibilities. The struggles of yesterday were tempered by the promise of today and the hope for tomorrow. Ethan learned the unspoken rhythms of her life. When to be quiet, when to offer support, when to step back. Maria discovered that power could be wielded with care, that influence could protect rather than dominate. And Jake thrived in a home filled with laughter, consistency, and love that was palpable in every glance, every touch, every shared meal. One quiet night, as Ethan and Maria sat on the balcony again, watching the city lights, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The night you drove me home," he replied, smiling faintly. "Every day. It changed everything." "And if you hadn't been so drunk," she teased. He laughed softly, pulling her closer. "Then maybe I would have missed the greatest gift of my life." Maria looked out over the city, her heart full, her life transformed. She had once been a lonely single mom, surviving each day by sheer willpower. Now, she was part of a family built on trust, love, and unexpected miracles. Ethan whispered in her ear, "I fell for you the moment I realized I couldn't fix my life alone." "And I fell for you," Maria said, "because you didn't ask me to be anyone other than myself." In that moment, the rain-soaked streets, the endless struggle, the loneliness, they all seemed distant, irrelevant. What mattered was here, now, in the warmth of connection, in the quiet assurance of partnership, in the fragile, exhilarating promise of a future they would face together. And as the city continued to hum below, Maria understood something profound. Life could surprise you, love could find you in the most improbable moments, and sometimes, a single act of kindness, a simple gesture, like offering a ride home, could change everything forever. The journey had begun on a rainy night with uncertainty and vulnerability, but it was only now, in shared laughter, whispered dreams, and intertwined lives, that they both understood the true power of what had started so unexpectedly. And the world, vast and indifferent as it could be, had suddenly become a place where magic, quiet, human, and real, was not only possible, but inevitable. The following weeks felt like living inside a dream stitched from moments of surreal clarity. Maria had always measured life in shifts, bills, and fleeting bursts of joy, but now each day carried a weight that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Ethan's presence was constant yet gentle, a force that demanded neither her surrender nor her silence. It was in the small things, a note left on the kitchen counter reminding her to rest, a text simply saying "I'm thinking of you," a quiet hand on her back as she struggled to lift grocery bags. One morning, Ethan surprised her by insisting on taking Jake to school himself. Maria had expected him to forget, or to find some reason to back out, but he arrived exactly on time, tie loosened, hair slightly mussed, carrying Jake's backpack with surprising ease. He crouched down to Jake's level, smiling warmly. "Ready to conquer the school day?" Jake grinned. "You're not going to embarrass me in front of my friends, are you?" "Absolutely not," Ethan said solemnly, though Maria caught the faint sparkle of amusement in his eyes. As they walked back home, Maria felt a surge of warmth, an odd combination of gratitude, awe, and love. Here was a man who commanded boardrooms and nations, humbled by the simplicity of dropping her son off at school, learning that life could not always be controlled. When they returned, Maria was struck by the unusual silence in her apartment. Ethan was sitting at the small table, hands folded, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Maria," he said, voice low, deliberate, "I want to talk about us." She nodded, curious and cautious. "Go ahead." "I've been thinking," he continued, "about how quickly everything changed, about how your life and mine collided that night. And I realized something important. I don't just want to be with you. I want to be part of your life, all of it. Jake, the diner, the small apartment, the chaos. I want it." Maria blinked. She had imagined moments like this 1,000 times, but none had ever carried the weight, sincerity, and gravity of Ethan's words. "You're serious?" "Completely," he said, leaning closer. "I want to learn. I want to grow. I want us to build something real, without the gloss, without the fear of failure." Tears pricked her eyes, a mixture of disbelief and hope. 4 years, she had been surviving, not dreaming, not expecting anything beyond the grind. And now, here was a man who had once seemed untouchable, vulnerable and willing to step into her world, not to dominate it but to belong. Days turned into weeks, and Maria began to see subtle, yet profound changes in Ethan. He wasn't just adjusting to her life, he was transforming. His boardroom demeanor softened when he spoke about her, his conversations less about power and profit, more about real people, their needs, and the consequences of his decisions. He started bringing Jake to work occasionally, showing genuine interest in his son's world, laughing freely at childish jokes that once would have seemed trivial. One evening, as Maria prepared dinner, she noticed Ethan hovering near the counter, a look of concentration on his usually imperturbable face. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Helping," he replied simply, chopping onions with surprising competence. "You're going to cry," she teased, a smirk tugging at her lips. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe. But only because I never imagined myself here. Not really here. And it feels right." Maria felt her chest tighten, not from the teasing, but from the realization that their worlds, once separate, were beginning to merge seamlessly. She no longer saw the billionaire or the lonely single mother, just two people navigating an unpredictable life together, building something neither could have achieved alone. Their connection deepened further when Jake started asking questions about Ethan's work. "Dad, what's a CEO?" he asked one evening, innocently, as they played in the living room. Ethan looked at Maria, then at Jake, and smiled. "It's someone who makes big decisions for a company," he explained simply. "But the most important decision I've ever made is right here, being part of your life." Maria watched him, heart swelling with admiration. He was learning the nuances of family, empathy, and love in ways that no boardroom could ever teach. And she, in turn, found herself opening doors she had long kept closed, letting herself trust, hope, and dream again. Then came the night that would mark a turning point, a gala Ethan had to attend, a formal event that she had no interest in attending but felt a quiet pull to see him in his element. When Maria arrived, dressed simply yet elegantly, she caught the eye of countless onlookers, women staring in envy, men intrigued, cameras snapping. But her gaze was fixed solely on Ethan, who, upon seeing her, seemed momentarily disarmed. He approached, offering his arm. "You're stunning," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "And you're nervous," she replied, a knowing smile on her lips. He laughed softly. "Maybe. But only because I realize how much this life will change now that you're part of it." The night unfolded like a dream. Introductions, handshakes, laughter. But through it all, Ethan's attention never wavered from Maria. She realized then that love, real, transformative love, was not about grand gestures or declarations. It was about presence, focus, and the quiet certainty of commitment. As the gala wound down, Ethan pulled Maria aside onto a balcony overlooking the city lights. The world below seemed insignificant compared to the gravity of the moment. "Maria," he said, voice husky with emotion, "I've spent my life chasing success, power, and influence. But tonight, I realize all of that means nothing without you and Jake. I want our life to be ours, messy, chaotic, beautiful, everything I never thought I could have." Maria felt tears spill, unbidden. "Ethan, I never imagined this. I never thought anyone could see me, really see me, and still want to stay." He cupped her face gently, eyes searching hers for understanding. "I do. I want to stay. I'll do everything I can to be worthy of your trust, your love, your family." And in that moment, under the soft glow of city lights, amidst the hum of a world that had never seemed so vast or so small at the same time, Maria knew that life had taken an impossible turn. A lonely single mom who once navigated life alone had found a partner who saw her completely, who accepted her world without compromise, who loved her fiercely and without condition. The night ended not with fireworks, speeches, or applause, but with a quiet intimacy of two hearts choosing each other, ready to face whatever storms, challenges, and miracles lay ahead. Their story, unexpected yet inevitable, had only just begun. The future was uncertain. There would be struggles, societal scrutiny, and challenges neither of them could foresee. Yet in that quiet certainty, the shared glance, the entwined hands, the subtle understanding, they found something unshakable, the knowledge that together, they could navigate anything. Maria and Ethan returned home, not to a life of perfection, but to a life filled with possibilities, laughter, love, and the delicate magic that comes when two worlds collide and create something entirely new. And for the first time in years, Maria felt the exhilarating freedom of hope, the kind of hope that changes, lives forever, one moment at a time. The days that followed were a delicate dance of adaptation, discovery, and quiet wonder. Maria had always been fiercely independent. Her life had been measured in routines, survival, and the little triumphs of a mother who did everything alone. But now, with Ethan seamlessly integrated into the rhythm of her home, her reality shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. Every morning, she woke to the sound of his voice softly calling Jake's name as he coaxed him out of bed, his patience a stark contrast to the hurried chaos of her previous solo mornings. Jake had taken to Ethan quickly. At first, he treated him like a novelty, a guest who might disappear at any moment, but over time, trust grew. There was laughter, real, unrestrained laughter that filled the apartment in the mornings and evenings alike. Ethan learned to endure Jake's relentless curiosity, his endless questions about business, life, and sometimes the simplest of things, like why toast always landed butter side down. And in these ordinary moments, Maria watched Ethan transform, revealing a side of him that no boardroom or media spotlight had ever seen. Patient, playful, vulnerable, genuinely invested. One crisp Saturday morning, Maria found herself watching Ethan from the kitchen doorway as he sprawled on the living room floor, building an elaborate fortress of toy blocks with Jake. His tie was absent, sleeves rolled up, hair tousled from sleep. And yet, in that chaos, there was a grace she could not ignore. Ethan looked up, catching her gaze, and for a moment, there was no billionaire, no CEO, only a man entirely present, entirely human. "You should help," Ethan said, without looking up, his hands steady as he placed a block atop the fortress. Maria shook her head, smiling. "I think you've got this covered. Though it's impressive, your attention to detail." Jake grinned, eyes bright. "Mom, he's amazing at this." Ethan laughed softly, the sound warm and unfamiliar in the quiet of her apartment. "Thanks, little man. But the architect deserves full credit." He winked at Jake, who threw a small cushion at him in playful protest. Later that afternoon, Ethan insisted they take a walk. Maria hesitated. Her world had been measured, structured, and the idea of stepping out into the city in the middle of the day with him felt surreal. Yet, there was something magnetic about his insistence, something that promised a different kind of life, one that didn't revolve around exhaustion, survival, or solitary routine. The streets were alive with the usual chaos, vendors calling out, cars weaving through traffic, the hum of conversations, but Ethan walked beside her, hand brushing hers occasionally, his presence grounding yet electrifying. They stopped at a small park where Jake ran ahead, laughing, chasing a pigeon that flitted awkwardly across the grass. Ethan watched him, a tender smile playing on his lips. "He's amazing," Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. "You've done an incredible job with him." Maria felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of pride and something deeper she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "I've done what I had to. But it's easier when someone like you notices." Ethan reached out, taking her hand gently. "Not just noticing. Appreciating. Respecting. You've built a life worth more than anything money can buy, Maria. And I want to be part of it, completely, without changing who you are." Her heart ached with the intensity of his sincerity. The vulnerability in his voice, the earnestness in his gaze, it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. She realized then that love, true love, was not about grand gestures, social expectations, or wealth. It was about seeing someone entirely, and choosing to stay, to invest, to believe in them when no one else might. Evenings became their sanctuary. They cooked together, sometimes disastrously, laughing at burned toast or spilled sauce. Ethan learned the delicate art of negotiating bedtime with Jake, and Maria saw a side of him that thrived not on control but on collaboration, compromise, and quiet humor. They spoke late into the night, sharing dreams, fears, and memories that neither had dared voice before. Each revelation deepened their bond, building a foundation stronger than any contract, more enduring than any promise made under pressure or circumstance. Then came the night that truly tested the depth of their connection. Maria's diner faced sudden closure due to an unexpected inspection, and the stress threatened to unravel her composure. For the first time in years, she felt cornered, powerless, alone. But Ethan appeared without hesitation, offering not solutions imposed by authority, but support guided by understanding. "We'll figure this out together," he said firmly, grasping her hands. "I won't let this crush you. Not alone, not ever." Together, they navigated the bureaucracy, contacted lawyers, and rallied the small but loyal community that depended on her diner. By the end of the week, the doors remained open, and Maria's sense of dignity and accomplishment was intact. But more than that, she realized she no longer had to face the world alone. As the months passed, their bond matured into something almost tangible, a force that neither circumstance nor challenge could dismantle. Ethan learned to cherish the mundane, the quiet, the imperceptible victories of everyday life. Maria discovered that love could coexist with independence, that vulnerability was not weakness, and that trust could be earned, nurtured, and reciprocated in ways that reshaped one's very understanding of family. One evening, as the city skyline glimmered against the horizon, Ethan and Maria sat on the balcony, Jake asleep inside, exhausted from a day of school and play. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "The night I was lost in the rain," he replied, voice low and warm. Every day. That night changed everything. It made me realize what I'd been missing: connection, trust, real human presence. Maria smiled faintly. And if you hadn't been drunk? Ethan laughed quietly, brushing her hair from her face. Then maybe I would have missed the greatest gift of my life. You. They sat in silence for a while, absorbing the weight of all they had endured, the improbable journey that had led them here. Outside, the city thrummed with life, oblivious to the miracle unfolding in a small apartment above the streets. But for Maria and Ethan, the world had narrowed to the warmth of shared breath, the gentle squeeze of hands, and the knowledge that love, unexpected, transformative, and real, had found them against all odds. In that quiet moment, Maria realized something profound. Life could surprise her, love could find her, and the impossible, the kind of life she had never dared imagine, was now hers to embrace. And as the night deepened, the stars hidden behind the city's haze, both Maria and Ethan understood that the story of a lonely single mom and a once-drunk CEO was no longer about chance or accident. It was about choice, courage, and the extraordinary transformation that happens when two worlds collide, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The life Maria had known, the long nights, the endless bills, the quiet loneliness of a small apartment, was gone. Not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into a foundation upon which something extraordinary had been built. Ethan's presence had not simply changed her days, it had altered the very rhythm of her life, the cadence of her heart, and the possibilities she allowed herself to imagine. The man who had once staggered drunkenly into her world, vulnerable and unpolished, had become a partner, a protector, and the kind of love she had never dared to hope for. They had learned to navigate their differences, the vast chasm of their worlds bridged by laughter, patience, and mutual respect. Ethan discovered the beauty in the ordinary, the spilled cereal, the scraped knees, the quiet triumphs of motherhood. And Maria saw that strength could take many forms, sometimes in the calm presence of someone who refused to dominate, but chose instead to stand beside you. Jake thrived in the glow of their union, a testament to the power of love, stability, and the rare alchemy that happens when two people find each other against all odds. The months that followed solidified a truth that neither Maria nor Ethan had anticipated. Love was not a series of grand gestures or a dramatic moment captured under city lights. It was quiet, persistent, transformative. It was waking up to the same face and still feeling astonishment. It was arguing over trivialities and finding compromise without resentment. It was showing up every day, not because it was expected, but because the heart demanded it. Ethan began to weave himself into every aspect of their lives without suffocating them, honoring Maria's independence while offering the stability and support she had never known. He learned the nuance of being patient, of listening not just to words but to emotions. He celebrated Jake's victories, large and small, and was present during failures, showing the boy that strength and vulnerability could coexist. Maria, in turn, allowed herself to be seen fully, for her exhaustion, her determination, her dreams, and her insecurities. She discovered that accepting love was not a weakness, but a quiet courage, a conscious decision to trust again. Their relationship became a tapestry of moments that were both mundane and miraculous. Breakfasts prepared together, walks through the park, late-night conversations under city lights. All these seemingly ordinary events carried the weight of meaning. Each touch, each glance, each shared laugh became a testament to a life reclaimed from struggle and uncertainty. The world outside continued its relentless pace, indifferent to their personal triumphs, yet for Maria and Ethan, nothing else mattered. They had discovered a private universe within the chaos of reality, one where their hearts could thrive unguarded. Then came the evening when Ethan took Maria's hands in his and looked into her eyes with a depth she had never experienced before. "Maria," he said, voice low and steady, "I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Not because I need to fill a void, but because I can't imagine a life that doesn't include you and Jake. You are my home." Tears blurred her vision, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming clarity of love realized. She had spent so long surviving, so long building walls, so long doubting that anyone could truly see her. And now, here was a man who saw all of her, accepted all of her, and chose to stay. "Yes," she whispered, the word trembling with the weight of every lonely night she had endured and every hope she had ever dared to nurture. "Yes, Ethan. I want that too." From that moment on, their lives became a series of affirmations, each day a choice to honor the bond they had found, each challenge an opportunity to strengthen it. Ethan negotiated boardroom battles with Maria's guidance, valuing her insight and perspective as an equal. Maria faced her own fears and insecurities with the courage that came from knowing she was no longer alone. And Jake grew up seeing a model of love that was neither dramatic nor performative, but steadfast, honest, and tender. A love that could weather storms and emerge stronger. The world would never understand the magnitude of what had happened that rainy night when Maria had offered him a ride home. It was a simple act, a flicker of kindness, yet it had sparked a chain of events that transformed not just 2 lives, but 3, into something resilient, profound, and enduring. Maria had once been a solitary figure navigating life in survival mode. Now, she was part of a family forged from trust, patience, and love that refused to be ordinary. Years later, when friends asked her how it all began, she would smile quietly and recall the moment of serendipity that changed everything. She would speak of rain-slicked streets, vulnerability, and a man who fell asleep on her couch with no pretension, no power, only a willingness to be human. And she would tell them that miracles often arrive disguised as accidents, disguised as drunken missteps, disguised as fleeting gestures of compassion that the universe rewards in ways too grand to comprehend. Ethan and Maria built a life that defied expectation. Together, they created not perfection, but authenticity. They created a home where love was both a shield and a light, where laughter was abundant, and where even the smallest victories felt monumental. They navigated the pressures of society, the scrutiny of the public eye, and the endless challenges of life with a confidence rooted in partnership rather than ego, in understanding rather than control. And in the quiet moments, watching Jake play, cooking meals together, walking hand in hand through familiar streets, they found a truth that eluded so many. That life is not measured by wealth, status, or external validation, but by the people who choose to stand beside you, who see you fully, and who love you despite, and because of, everything that makes you who you are. As they sat one evening on the balcony, the city lights casting a golden glow over their shared world, Maria realized that love, when real, was not a fleeting emotion. It was a force that transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary, the mundane into the miraculous. And in Ethan's steady gaze, she saw the reflection of a life rebuilt, not from fortune or circumstance, but from courage, trust, and the unshakable power of hearts that refused to surrender. The rain-slicked streets of their past had given way to sunlit avenues of hope. The lonely nights had given way to shared laughter and whispered dreams. And the improbable story of a single mother and a once-drunk CEO had blossomed into a life that no one could have predicted, but everyone who witnessed it could feel. A life brimming with love, promise, and the quiet certainty that together, they could face anything the world dared to throw at them. For Maria, Ethan, and Jake, the future was no longer a series of uncertainties. It was a canvas, vast and unbroken, waiting for their hands to shape it, their hearts to color it, and their love to define it. And as they leaned into each other, enveloped in warmth and possibility, they understood a simple yet profound truth. The right person can arrive when you least expect it, in the most unlikely circumstances, and turn your entire life into a story worth telling, a story of hope, resilience, and love that would echo far beyond the boundaries of their world. And in that echo, they knew, this was only the beginning.